Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Chris and you are with Precision Composites Technologies LLC out here in sunny Scappoose, Oregon. It's about evening time right now. We do some pretty cool things out here. Number one is we build the Viper jet. I'm also the original builder and team lead from back when we used to build these sub-assemblies. So if you want one of these things built, come to me. We have something new that we're about to add into our services. So let's head on inside, go take it out. So inside this box is our next great thing that we've been waiting on for a while now. We ordered it back at the end of August and it has finally shown up. So many of you have been wondering what it is that we've been getting ready to add. A couple of you that are close to me already know what we have, but this video is actually an unboxing and a review of this item, the Peopoly Noir large format 3D printer. So this is going to be able to print rather large things in high detail. It's actually a 4K UHD printer. It will print to 50 microns. So very high resolution. And if you want to check out a couple other reviews on this, head over to YouTube. You can check out Uncle Jesse and also 3D Printing Nerd, and they've done reviews on the Peopoly Noir and also the Peopoly Phenom, as well as a couple other things that we're going to talk about. Now, the only thing that hasn't been discussed in some of those reviews is the actual unboxing and setup of the machine. They've done reviews on prints and problems and so forth, but nothing on the actual setup. The one thing that was complained about early on from units being shipped out was that the units were getting kind of damaged because they weren't secured very well for shipping. So for this unit, they've done a little bit better. They've strapped it down to a pallet. I'll turn it around here for you. And so it's got some straps on it, and it's actually pretty well held down. There is one strap on it that's pretty loose, you can see, and it did slide around. You know, you can tell where they had it down, but for some reason it just kind of came loose. The box will move and slide on the pallet, but the box itself is going to weigh 110 pounds. So it's not a light unit. You need two people to actually move this thing around if you're going to unload it. I happen to have a cart sitting around that I was actually able to just set right up next to the tailgate on my truck and slide it right off. So that wasn't too much of an issue there. But we're going to go ahead and unstrap this thing and unbox it and see what it looks like inside. Double check that there isn't any damages to it. The box is actually in pretty good shape. You know, no big dings, rips, tears, anything like that on there. So we should have a pretty good unit sitting in here. But we'll check it out. The other thing we're going to take a look at as well is a couple of the other units we're going to use for doing the processing. One is going to be the resin that we're going to start with is from Tech, and that's their fast resin, which is in white. This is an ABS-like material, and it's supposed to be non-brittle. It's not as hard as another resin that they have, which is their build, and that's more of an engineering resin, which has a lot harder shore hardness to it, and you can drill and tap it and do other things with it. But for what we want to do right now for our test print, we're going to use the fast. The other day I was watching a review from Uncle Jesse where he compared Simple Green, Mean Green, Mr. Clean, and standard IPA alcohol for cleaning your resin 3D prints. And the Mean Green actually worked out really well compared to just using the IPA. Now for Tech, their label actually suggest using 95% ethanol alcohol. But from what we saw in the demos and reviews from Uncle Jesse's deal, we're pretty well set on the mean green, and it's pretty cheap. It was less than $5 for this gallon. So that should last us for quite a while, and the prints should come off pretty clean to the point where we can just do a quick wash with some clean water afterwards and then put them into UV cure. For the 2 units for cleaning, we got a brand new Anycubic wash and cure. So this will be good for doing small parts. And take the lid off. It comes with everything that you see in here. It comes with this sealable jar, so once you're done you can close it back up, keep your liquid in there from spilling out. It has a basket inside, and it also comes with the turntable for running the UV lights on this, which if we pull this back off, there you go. Now you can see the UV lights that are up on the stem there. Once the turntable goes down, it just sits there with the cover on it, and it'll cure your part. So this will be good for doing small parts. Now, with the printer that we have, it's going to produce parts that are big enough to, say, print like a helmet that'll fit on your head. So it's got an 11-inch Z-axis to it. It's pretty big. So if we're going to be printing something that big, it's not going to fit in this. But what I do have sitting around that we got here a while back that my dad actually found for me is this Ultrasonic cleaner by Sonic Soak. And you can go on to their website at sonicsoak.com. I'll put the link in the video. And you get this cleaning tool. This runs right now about $150 on there. And then you can also get this collapsible container. That runs about $30 right now. So this should be well big enough for anything large that we need to print. And we can just use the ultrasonic cleaner to actually clean the parts. So we'll do a little experiment on that, double check that the lining in the bucket is fine for that. It should be, especially with this cleaner that we're going to use, this mean green. And we'll give that a test, but I know that for the Anycubic it should be just fine to use that mean green super strength cleaner. And actually, if you're looking for this, I did find it at a Walmart, and that was probably about the only place I really had the best luck. You can get it online, just check the price. If it's more than $5, you might need to look elsewhere, because this stuff's pretty cheap. And you're gonna get a lot of value and a lot of cleaning out of that for that low of a price. So without further ado, let's get this thing unboxed and see how it looks. All right, so as we're unboxing this too, I want to make sure that we actually look to the inside of the main box to show you that they actually didn't do too bad of a job on this. It's another dense box on the inside, and then of course they put in reinforcements plus plastic reinforcements on the corners too, so that kind of helps with some of the banging around if it actually happens. And then they've also got a checklist posted on here. I'll just go ahead and read through it. Check for shipping damages. Well, it's double packed, so we're good there. No real bruises there, so that's good. Take a picture of any box damages. We don't have to worry about that. Locate the working space. It weighs over 40 kilograms. Yes, it's heavy. It should be placed on a sturdy and level surface. Make sure you have a spot picked out and have another person before you help proceeding. Make sure the wall outlet is grounded. Yeah, double check that whatever you're plugging into, it's a 3-prong outlet. Don't go using a standard old 2-prong deal. And find a way up. Maybe challenging to remove it because of the foam. Inventory check. Once it's removed, do not open the printer until it's placed on a sturdy surface. Okay. All accessories are packed inside the printer. Be careful removing the foam, as the accessories and extra items you purchased may have shifted during shipping. Good to know. Take each layer out slowly, starting from the top. You should find these in order. LCD panel, if you ordered extra, handle with caution. Vat, power adapter, accessories, FEP film, USB drive, and build plate at the bottom. Locate the USB drive. It contains a start guide and links to set up your Phenom Noir. If you cannot find a USB drive, and this is in smaller writing, visit Peopoly or Peopoly. I'm not really sure exactly how you're supposed to pronounce that, so we'll just roll with it. Support section to access the setup guide, and thank you for your purchase. Welcome. Okay, so let's see if we can get this thing out of here and get it unboxed. Well, it wasn't too bad. A little easier just to get rid of the box, and since we knew that there was no damage on the shipping box, either on the outer or even the inner, I wasn't worried about too worried about what the outside of this thing was going to look like. Which it's kind of like the monolith, you know, in 2001, Space Odyssey. This thing is just huge. So let's take a look at this thing. Well, we got, pull this back. That looks good. So that's our glass there, and it's tinted to keep the UV out, any potential UV. This is going to be our display screen for when we're reading on things. Get that off there. And let's take a look on the inside, shall we? Carefully open this up. That's kind of cool. It's got a magnetic latch on it, so it just kind of helps hold it there in place. Lots of foam. Okay, so we'll hold that one as we open here. Make sure that nothing else is there. Nice, nicely stacked. So that should be holding everything in place. You can kind of see the Z and the ball screw back there. Move on down to the bottom here. There is the holder for the build plate. Let's go and take this other protector off the acrylic here. Holding the phone at the same time. Peeling back, it's a little on the difficult side. There we go. Okay, so I guess one stack at a time, eh? And probably start with this one because that's the easiest one to get out. Start knocking these things down. Nothing in that. Double check all these before we just throw them on the floor. Make sure you see there's some tools there. You got a scraper. That's kind of nice. That one's empty. All right, so we've got a power cord. We've got our Allen tools. Looks like the USB is in there too. There's the USB stick. And that looks like FEP film, or no, those are gloves. Those are vinyl gloves. So one of the things we need to also discuss too is that handling the resins with this, you gotta make sure you're wearing gloves at all times. Nice little rigid scraper for getting things off the build plate. This should be our FEP film. Awesome. Okay, so let's see, is that solid bottom there? Yeah, so I'll just take all this out at once, like that. All right, there is our resin vat. This is going to go all the way in the bottom here. And this will come out. And they even provide a mesh screen filter in there for refiltering your resin back into the bottles. We have more of these here in stock, just because we have some primer and paint work that we do for tooling. So, but if you need more, you can always order those online or check with your local paint supply store that supplies automotive paints and so forth, and you should be able to get a sleeve of those there. They'll last you for a long time. Amazon has them as well. You can check with them. Next up, looks like the top for the build plate. Might even have the build plate in there. Yeah, it looks like the build plate's in there. So pull that out. And that's all solid. So I'll take that over here. And down below should be, I have to take this off, I believe. Maybe we leave that on there. No, I have to take that off because that's got a double thing there. We'll have to zero out the build bed on here with a sheet of paper, I believe. But this one's doubled over, so that won't work. We'll just use a standard size sheet. There we go. All right, that's just to keep the glass clean, looks like. Let's go check our build plate here. Well, this is going to be a two-hand job. We got some of the other stuff cleared off over here to make some more room for ourselves. So let's see if we can get this build plate out. There we go. And there's the build plate. Take just a little bit of acetone here and get rid of that residue. It's pretty sticky tape that they use. That's better. Okay, so next thing is we need to actually go ahead and hook up the power now. According to the setup guide, which you'll find on Peopoly's website, if you go into their support section, you can go to Noir, it has an actual online guide of how to set this thing up. So we're going to set up a power cord into it. I've moved the unit back onto a cart here so that we can actually move it around and then get it leveled out to a place where we want to kind of keep it at home. So let's put in the power cord here. Yes, the unit is made in China. plug it in to record. There we go. And the next thing is, let's open the door back up here. We're supposed to go ahead and start it up. Got the power switch over here, and we should see it boot. Hey, look at that. All right, everything's pretty well ready to go on there. So then we got to look at our next step for being able to put the vat and the build plate in. All right, so next is we go to Tool, and then we're going to go to Manual, and it's set for 10mm movements right now. And then we're going to go up with it so we can raise the build plate armature up. So as we do that, you should move 10mm at a time. Now, looking at this thing, there's the size of my hand, okay? That's just my hand next to it, and look how much more it has to go. So it's a pretty good size unit here. So we'll keep going up. As we're raising this up, we'll kind of talk about why we decided to get this. This is going to be our first 3D printer, but the reason we wanted to go with this larger unit is to be able to do larger things. You can get the Anycubic or the Igloo Mars or any of those things, but they're all small build platforms. So they're great for doing little figurines and small things, but when it comes to larger items that you want to be able to build, it makes it really hard because then you got to print in multiple pieces. Whereas this, we can do whole units basically in one shot. So prototyping, say for specific aircraft stuff that people want to have a prototype of to try out, or even an actual production piece, we'll be able to do that on here and be at a high resolution and something usable. We can also print some small molds doing this, or even small parts to create other tooling with. So it's a good way to get into it. We like the high resolution factor of everything, so we don't have to worry about all the build lines that you'd see for standard filament prints, and the product will end up turning out a lot nicer. So I think that's high enough. All right, our next thing is to clean the LCD screen, and they want you to use 90 to 99% alcohol so that it's pure and doesn't leave streaks. Alternatively, you can use a lint-free microfiber cloth, which we'll use, so I don't have any IPA in here. And we'll just use that to make sure that the screen is clean and lint-free. And then before we actually put the vat in, they want you to test the screen to make sure it's working. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to hit calibrate, and 200 seconds exposure time for the test image. So let's hit next. Yep, that looks good. So those are all UV lights that are in there on the LCD screen. So that looks good. I don't see any, I'll look along this whole thing, I don't see any burnout LEDs in there anywhere, so I think we'll be good. So we'll go ahead and hit back and move on to the next thing, which I believe is sticking the vat in. So the next step is actually to install the build plate first, and you're going to do that, and then they want you to actually go through and double check the Z position at 0, even though it was already set at the factory. They just want you to check that anyway in case there was some sort of a shifting during shipment on the plate itself. So we're going to go ahead and install the plate now. We've already wiped it down on the build plate side, so it's nice and clean. And we're going to take and slide this unit on to there. And then we're going to put our holding screw on. So that's nice and secure now. It's all the way back. And then we're going to run it back down to home. This is going to take a little while. And we're at the bottom. Should click off. Yep, there's the 0. It's going to come back down. There's the bottom. Okay, so let's next check our next step here. Okay, now we're going to check the position of the plate to make sure that it's flat and level to the LCD screen. The trick here is that a sheet of paper should not slide between the build plate and the LCD screen. The only stipulation that I see in their setup manual is that they have this tape right here which holds the LCD screen in, and it covers up the screw holes. And in the first part of the manual they've got the tape on there. In the second part it shows the tape off. I'm assuming though that the tape needs to stay on there just to keep any resin from getting into the screws and hardening and creating a big mess. So we're going to set it up with the assumption that the tape needs to stay on there. And when we go to slide the paper in there, it's tight right there. But I can slide this paper all the way back. So to me, that tells me that we gotta readjust this plate. So to do so, we loosen up these screws on each side and let the plate drop down. And then we'll take and just be able to see if we can move this paper at all. If it's still got a gap, then it means we need to adjust the Z height a little bit at 0.1 millimeter increments, and then readjust this plate as well. But I think just by loosening these, and it should actually drop down to where it needs to be. So I've adjusted it down just by loosening the screws on each side of the hold down clamp there, and I've got it down a little bit better. But what I'm seeing is that it's nice and tight here, but I can slide it through all the way through the center like that. You can see it come through the back. It's got a little bit more tension to it, but where it's starting to get really tight is actually where it's tighter on this corner too. So what I'm thinking is happening is that where the tape is doubled up along the build plate is actually what's really holding this thing out, because that's a lot tighter there. You can't slide the paper as easily, but it's only in the corners. And again, I think that's just because of the tape. So my thought is to actually just remove where the tape is actually doubled up over itself, and that should give us a little bit better even leveling on the build plate. So we're going to try it. So we cut out the overlaps on there, both sides. You can barely see it right there. So it looks like that was probably the issue. It's back at home. And there's the bottom. And so just keep in mind too, a layer of tape is around 4/1000ths of an inch. So it's pretty significant when you start overlapping those and it starts building up. So let's see what happens. We should actually be able to slide this piece of paper all the way through now. It's still a little tight there. Yeah, it's actually not bad at all. I can move it through all the way right now. So, but that's good news because it tells us that yes, we do need to adjust this. Now this is actually getting a little tighter there, so that's some good news. But it's just this side over here that looks like we need to come down with it. So once again, we will loosen up our screws here, and you can see that there's quite a bit of adjustment to these. So I think there's even some bottom play there. So I got quite a bit of ways I can move down with this thing. So once I get this re-leveled out with a sheet of paper under it, it should be just fine. Okay, so to just show what I'm doing here, I'm actually, because the sheet of paper is actually too small to fit the whole build plate, I'm actually using 2 sheets and just running them side by side so I pick up both ends. Otherwise, I'm gonna end up with something kind of offset, kind of like it already was. So now that it's set up, I'm just going to go in here, kind of push down just a little bit. Now, with the play that's in there, I can lift this thing up and down pretty easily. So that's how much play their adjustment is in there. So I'm going to pull this sheet out just a little bit so make sure that they're definitely not overlapping each other. Look in the back, that looks good. And then we'll tighten one side here. Loosely tighten them first. Let's start with this side this time. Tighten this one down. Just double check. The plate has quite a bit of weight to it, so I'm not having to worry about pushing down on it. You don't want to push too hard anyway on that LCD screen and risk cracking it or something. That tape also does seal up the LCD screen because it's not a sealed unit on there. So be careful if you take any of the tape off there. You don't put a big hole in it somewhere and open up too much of a spot there where resin can get into, because it might give you a problem later on. Make sure these are nice and secured. Don't want those backing out. Okay, now if that's set, we'll try this. That's a lot better. A lot more tension on it now. It's a little looser in the center. Again, I think it's because of some of the tape along that edge. It's not bad. It's definitely still tighter. That side's tighter still than the other side. Okay, I think we got a little extra tweaking here on this one corner, and it seemed to tighten up a little bit more. So definitely a lot better now. So that's what I want to see. So it's nice and tight there. It's tight along the back. You can get this in if you really work at it. There we go. But for the most part, it's got some tension to it. So it's not super tight, but it's tight enough that I definitely don't want to go any further. So I think we're going to call that part of the calibration good. So our Z-axis is set. This is tightened down. The nice thing about this also, which I don't have a light set up in here at the moment, but the arm here is actually cut out for this to actually nest into. So there is no guessing of where this build plate is supposed to secure to. You pretty much just let it sit flat, push it back, and then this edge stops, as well as where this little tongue is at. That's all kind of milled out on this arm. So this sets into a nice home area, and you don't have to worry about it going side to side or being kind of funky on you. So just make sure that when you do put this on, it sits nicely into there. You're not overriding onto something else. So next is installing the vat, and this already has a sheet of FEP film, which you can kind of see the reflection on it there, already installed. So this is the bottom side of it. And it looks like it's just a clamping ring that basically holds the film in place. can see it's nice and clear, and we just need to make sure that it's nice and clean when it goes in. They say to wipe it down with alcohol if need be. I've got a little piece of debris right there. Let's see if we can zoom in on it there. You can kind of see it floating around kind of near the filter on the styrofoam there. So we're going to make sure that's off there. Any little debris, you've got to make sure it's gone. Otherwise it could mess with the actual print. And make sure that this side is clean as well. And then we'll put it in place. And it says to put it in, center it up, and then you just use the thumb screws, and it's just finger tight. You don't want to over tighten it. We'll make sure that we raise our build plate back up so we can actually get the vat in there, and then we'll check it out. So we've got the film cleaned off on the bottom and the inside. We're just going to slide it in place. One thing I'd like to note is that just wiping it with a dry microfiber cloth over that plastic actually gives you some static. So you can actually see if you're holding this against the black or something, if you got little hairs or something in it, you'll kind of see them move around as you're wiping it. So maybe a little of the alcohol will kind of help with dissipating some of that static discharge. Otherwise, you might be fighting a little bit on it, but it cleans pretty easily. So we're just going to slide this into place underneath the arms and see if we can move this a little bit to get a little bit better light. There we go. Okay, so now, yeah, we'll just keep it this way. So now you can see the arm over there. That has to line up with this hole, and that arm with that hole. So we'll slide this in. And pretty much looks like it's going to go back to a stop set point there. Go over here, grab our little thumb screws that come in the pack. And we'll take one. That's just going to go on down in there. Okay, I'm just going to set that to there. And I'll do this one over here. Okay, so we'll just check this. Yeah, it won't really move anywhere. So that's good news. Those kind of located in place. It's just going to go thumb tight, finger tight. Okay, good enough. All right, let's check what's next. So we're pretty much set to go. So the next thing is we're just going to add our resin into the vat. And we've already shaken it up for the 15 to 30 seconds that they were wanting it to be shook up at before you pour it out. They say if it's a new bottle, make sure that the retainer ring that's normally here, you take off so it doesn't accidentally drop in the vat. You could have a little problem with trying to get it out, all the goo. So you take the little stopper off here, carefully. Look at all that white goodness in there. Okay, so we're going to pour this in, and what they say is that you can pour to just above where the angle is there, and that should be plenty enough. Any more than that, and it could end up overflowing out of the vat, so we don't want to end up doing that. You'll also notice that the vat has a nice little detent in one corner for being able to pour back out into the bottle. If you need to clean and empty the vat, use a filter and you can pour it back into the original bottle and just make sure it's all sealed up afterwards. So we'll go ahead and add this. I'm going to raise this up just slightly more. So again, we'll go into tool, manual, raise. I'm just going to hit this 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That'll give me 100 millimeters of raise. Give me a little bit more room to be able to pour this resin into. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pour this in. just like that. Oh, hey, that's pretty good. One bottle, which is 1 kilogram of resin, goes right to that line. So that's a good reference there. So you don't really want to hold much more than that in there. We're only going to use about 1/3 of this as it is. So we'll look down inside there. Looks like it was pretty well shook out. There's no solid sitting in the bottom. It's just all nice mixed. So put the cap and seal back on just to keep stuff out of there. And then next I've already got our USB stick in there. It came with one that has the test file on it, but we're going to go ahead and do our own test print of some stuff that we've already got set up and designed. Oops, I don't want to go to home, I want to go back and back again. We're going to go to print, and then we're going to go to the first test print, which is this one here, and it kind of shows a picture. I had kind of an isometric view of what was going on. So we've got 5 items there that it's going to print, and we're going to see what happens. So we're going to go ahead and hit play, or go, this is it will be. And the fan kicks on, we're going to start blowing the plastic around. And it sounds like a jet engine starting up, and it's going down to the bed. The slicer that's used for this is called Box, and you can get that online. It's free, and it's pretty easy to use. Any supports that you need to do for items that are going to require supports, they actually say to use the heavy supports. Don't use light or medium, use the heavy support setting. And you can set your raft and then your supports and all that. And we did that on one part. The other parts are all going to print pretty solid to the bottom. So it goes down into there. It's going easy, and let's see what happens. So there's the first one. I'll go ahead and close the door on this. Take 12 hours, 1 minute to print, it looks like. So light is off and moves up. Then it moves back down. The light's back on again. Now the first couple layers, it has a higher exposure time on the light. And then as it gets going, then it'll be about 1.5 to 2 seconds between layers. So it'll print really fast. With the other settings I had on here originally that I put in, it was going to take like 19 hours to print. And I went back and looked at some of the settings and said, no, this should be printing a lot faster than that. Check out the original settings and decide to go with those. So we'll see what happens here. We'll come back in the morning and see what we get. Hopefully everything works out well. Good morning, everybody. We're back, and looks like we got a couple of the items actually did build on this, and looks like one of them failed. One of them had a partial failure. So let's see what's going on in here. I don't see anything down in the vat right now, but it looks like the raft on that one kind of came apart a little bit. And we got a little bit of a slump on the top of that piece. But that one looks like it's going to be pretty good. And possibly this little holder as well. The other thing that didn't print, oh yep, there it is. It's way back in there, and it's a little gear, so that printed. So we'll check all these out, see how they went. Some of this that's up here Could be because it was a little bit cool and the exposure time wasn't quite long enough. So that's a possibility. Not really sure what's going on right there, but I guess we'll see once we pull everything out. So I'll get some gloves on, pull this thing out, and start getting some stuff washed off. Got our workspace all set up now, so what I've done is I've just taken some of our masking paper that we use, which is painter's paper, and I've just taped along the edge of the vat. And that way, as we pull this thing out, we don't just go dripping resin all over the edge of it. Try to keep the machine clean. You'll notice that the build plate, this is the newer design build plate, so it's kind of got an angle to the top to help the resin run off a little bit. But there still is some collection along the edges, just from surface tension. So as you loosen this thing up and get ready to pull it out, just be aware of that, and it's going to drip down. So we want to get that to actually go back into the vat. So we'll take our screw loose. Actually, I don't even take it out. I just need to loosen it. And we'll slide this out. I'm going to tip it to one corner here. Yeah, see, that paper already came in handy. Just going to let that drip off a little bit. And take it over to our work surface here. Put it upside down. Look at that. Take her off. Close the door back up for the moment. So check these out. There's the inside of this box. This is actually for a Nerf 2x4 rough cut gun that I found on, I think it was on Thingiverse. And it's actually a holder for the gun, so you can have this sitting on the floor and then the gun will sit upright. So, and then this is the gear for that same gun that typically strips out on the inside. The detail on this looks really good. And for a first print, I'll try to get out of the shadow here. That looks really nice. These other two parts, there's supposed to be a third part sitting here, and for some reason it doesn't look like it printed or it didn't stick or something, so we may end up with a wad inside the vat that we may need to scrape out. But this part is one that drafted up just using 3D Builder, and it looks pretty good. This is actually a part that we normally make out of carbon fiber for the Viper jet, and it's an Aileron boot seal. And then this is a part that we drafted up using an existing part, again using 3D Builder, and it's an RV dump cap. So detail looks pretty good on that. The only issue that I see is possibly down there. So we'll get these things scraped off and we'll see what they actually look like on their other surfaces. So out of the package of things that came with that printer are two different scrapers. One's a plastic one, which I believe is for getting things off the FEP film inside the vat, and then a metal scraper for actually taking the parts off of this guy. So the one thing I noticed after I pulled this out of the box is it still had some burrs on it in places, and from when they ground on it. So I just took and used our little 2-inch grinder with a Scotch Brite disc to knock those burrs down nice and flat and kind of sharpen up the edge a little bit more, and then just a little bit of 600 grit sandpaper just to knock off any little tiny burrs so that we don't go gouging our plate here. So let's see what we need to do here. We'll start with a small little gear. Turn this on its side and we'll see if we can actually get this to come off. We'll go with the bevel side of the scraper down to the surface so we don't go gouging into the plate or even the part. that came off pretty easy. So yeah, we'll get a little closer look up on that once we get these things washed off. And see, yeah, this is going to come off pretty easy. That raft is nice and easy to take off there. Look at that. We'll go for our cup next. There's that one. And now I'll go for the big guy, the box. Let's see what happens here. Get a little bit of a funny thing going on the bottom there. Edge. There we go. Nice. So we can clean up this build plate and it'll be ready to go again. But I think for now, these are pretty slimy right now just because they still have resin on them. We'll run them through our wash and cure machine. I think I can get this into the any cubic, and of course all these parts should be able to fit in there pretty easily. Before we do that, because this is still soft, we actually want to go ahead and start taking these supports off now, because if you wash them and then cure them, they get a little harder to take off. So we'll just take those off now. Look at that. Ooh, yeah. So got a little bit of distortion along the top here. It didn't quite cure like the way we wanted it to. So yeah, that's kind of a failure there, but we'll see what we need to do to change that. Maybe we need to set this to an offset angle a little bit, or just increase the distance from the build plate so that the light can get to everything. I don't know. If you have thoughts on that, put them in the comments below and we'll see what we need to do for that one. This one turned out pretty good. A little bit of an artifact along there. We could definitely hear the material sticking to the FEP film as it was pulling out in between curing layers. So it does stick on there. It has a pretty good peel force on it. So we know it was working. Obviously it did, because we got a pretty good print on this one. It's got a little bit of a change or a distortion along this edge here. Again, I think that's just from the peeling. Maybe it wasn't quite cured enough on these bottom layers as it was going. Could be that it wasn't hot enough as well, or warm enough in there. We started this and the room temp was sitting at about 66 degrees. And the fast says it can do about, the lowest is about 58 degrees, but it needs to just have longer exposure time for the bottom layers. So it could be that because the place was warming up still and the resin was still trying to warm up a little bit, we might have just had a little bit of cold resin here that didn't quite set up the way we wanted it to. This box also has similar thing going on right there. It's got kind of an edge that's opened up a little bit. I got a little bit of a gap that goes, I don't know, how far does that go? Shove this down in there. Let's go a ways to there. You can actually see it go through there, so maybe half an inch, 3/8. So, but hey, first test print, we got a couple things that we can kind of check out, see what's going on. So let's go ahead and get these things cleaned up and washed, and we'll get them cured up. So we've got the vat all drained back out and filtered back into its bottle, and just as I suspected, the one part that did not print was stuck to the FEP film. You can see where it had printed and it was stuck to the build plate, but I just think it couldn't overcome the peel force initially after it built some of that up for the next flange, which you can kind of see down at the bottom there, and it just pulled it right off the build plate because there wasn't much of a surface for it to seal onto. So we may have to go back and put either a raft on there with some supports or do something else just to get that to actually stick better to the build plate. It just needs more surface area there to overcome the surface area that's on the FEP film. I think it'll be fine after that. Everything else came off pretty easily, so I just need to clean this up with a little IPA and get it back in the machine so it's nice and clean and it's ready to go for the next run whenever we do that. So we've gone through and finished washing all the parts and going through the cure cycles on them. And you can see that the white from Soriatec, actually changes color a little bit and goes to more of almost a tan color as it cures. So it's not as pure white as it was when it came out of the machine. As it cures up, it darkens up a little bit. But so these two parts here ran for 18 minutes a piece, and then these smaller ones, the little gear there, I ran just for 6 minutes, and it turned out pretty good as far as the cure went. You can see, get in kind of close there, there's some deformation here, and all of these have some deformation right now. And I think what happened is because we're running a bunch of different parts and they all have different surface areas on them, as they come off, get lifted from the FEP film, the FEP film of course has almost kind of a bow to it as it lifts, and each of these parts are putting a different type of stress on that FEP film on the vat. And I think that's why we're seeing some of this tearing and lifting away from the surface profile, and along with maybe just not quite enough exposure time for the bottom. And so even this, you can see there's a little bit of a shift, and it kind of shifts to the side a little bit, and it's also open right there. But I think also the fast exposure time after the initial bottom exposures needs to be probably doubled. Right now it's at 1.5 seconds. You could probably go to 2. I'm going to say we're going to go to 3, because like this layer here where it's attaching to the main base layer and the wall thickness starts to thin out, we just don't have enough exposure time kind of going between there. I think that's why we're getting some open areas on there. So I think there's going to be a combination of things. Number one, just run one project at a time in here, and then also increase our exposure time after the initial bottom exposures are done, and that should probably help, along with also probably the heat being up. We're sitting at about 72 degrees in here now, and when, like I said, when we started we were sitting at probably about 65, 66 in here. So I think having things just up a little bit more, around 70, 72 degrees will help, along with changing the exposure time, and we'll kind of refine things. Now, one of the things I want to also mention, because we didn't really look at this one yet, so the inside of this looks pretty darn good. You know, not a whole lot of issue there. There is a little bit of a thin spot to it on one side, and that could just be some of my modeling. Again, we just did this in 3D Builder. It's a free download through Microsoft, and there's not a whole lot of features in that program that you can use that makes it really user-friendly. So I couldn't really figure out how to do some beveling and some other things in there very easily. I really need to get into using SolidWorks for doing the modeling instead. But the inside of this looks really good. The outside, however, created a problem. But even more so is something else. Yeah, what's going on there? That's not correct. That's not how I did it in the model. The wording is all backwards. So, why did this happen? We do not know. Aside from it just looking kind of junky on the outside there, which when it printed in this direction. So this surface here was towards the build plate with the supports. And I think that's why this inside turned out really nice. But the outside, I think, ended up with just a bunch of extra resin sitting on the top and it couldn't cure. So I think, number one, this might actually have to change to more of an angle as we print. So it's sitting kind of like that. The reason why I didn't print it like this is because I didn't want a bunch of excess resin just sitting in the cup, because there's no way for it to drain out. We don't have a drain hole in here. We don't want a drain hole in the first place because that would defeat the whole purpose of this cap. So we might just have to change the angle on this. But more importantly is we need to figure out what happened with the lettering here, because that being backwards is no bueno. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. Overall though, really good for doing test print. Our one piece that's missing is a tip that we created in 3D Builder, and of course that one failed right off the bat because it came off the build plate and just ended up as one little puck down on the FEP film. So we'll kind of go back to that, figure out a different way to print that one, and probably just do that on its own. And I think we'll do the same thing with this piece here and do that one as a single print, do this one as a single print. This one we're probably not going to reprint. You know, the kid gets to kind of play around with that and use it for his gun. But we definitely need to reprint this, because having that sort of an issue there with the teeth being misaligned is not going to work. So I think if we just redo this print, center it up on the bed, and change our exposure times, I think we'll be fine with that one. All in all, a great test on the Peopoly Noir. A few tweaks here and there, making some adjustments. I think things will be printing up just fine. Cleaning wise, takes a little bit. Just with the Anycubic and running it through the solution, it gets rid of a lot of the heavy stuff. Still need to go through with a little 1-inch chip brush and kind of brush it off using that solution, then do a final rinse with some water, and you can kind of scrub off any of the excess that's on there. I think there was a little bit more excess than what we would normally see, only because our exposure times were probably a little less than they should be. I think if we increase those exposure times, we'll have better prints, less issues that we saw on the bottoms and the shifting, the warping, and then we probably won't have as much residue sitting on the outside that didn't quite cure up correctly, especially like along the surface where we had a lot. But overall, very happy. Resolution comes out great. FYI for this unit, it is on back order with Matter Hackers, and be aware too that shippers are having delays everywhere. FedEx, regular carriers, everybody. So if you order one, expect a long lead time and expect to work through some shipping issues as well. So shout out to Eric over at Matter Hackers for helping us out, getting us through the last couple days of getting this in here. Helped us take care of some issues that we had. And yeah, just be patient, get it in. This thing works great. If you got any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments section, and please like and subscribe to our channel. And if there's anything else that you'd like to see us do out here, put it in the comments. You know, not only this, but again, we also do composites work. We work with carbon fiber, fiberglass, build aircraft. We're doing all sorts of different things too. So doing this is one more service that we're adding into our list of services. So I think it's going to be a great benefit to us and to any of you out there as well that are looking for some prototyping or even some production prints done. We can see a great benefit to using the resin side of 3D printing versus doing any of the filament printing. So give us a shout, let us know if we can help you out, and have a great day.